Hello one, hello all, it's the gothiest ghost of them all, Caspa in the flesh, and it's time for a review of Knock Loose, You Won't Go Before You're Supposed to. Wait a minute. Something's not right here. No, something's not right. Where's Sean?
So this Knock Loose band, yeah, they're pretty heavy, huh?
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, are they heavier than the Avenged Sevenfold?
I don't know about that. I don't know if they're that heavy.
Are they heavier than Disturbed?
Getting close.
Oh, okay. Well, are they heavier than Motionless in White?
No shot.
Whoa, wow, this is pretty.
Sean, get out of there!
Yeah, don't talk to him. He's an idiot.
Okay.
So yeah, man, like this Knock Loose album, I feel like with this one here, like this is definitely their best one.
Yeah, 100%.
And I pretty much say that as someone who was never really a fan, like a big time fan of like their earlier work.
Mm-hmm.
Like I enjoyed it, but it was never like really something that would like make like my year-end list.
Right.
But like with this one here, it's like there's just so much variation here. And not to say that there wasn't variation on the last one. I just felt like it was one of those things like, okay, we've been here before, where are we going? And even with the writing too sounds like more intense. Like it definitely sounds like more personal.
Yep, exactly what I was going to say, yep.
Yeah, like it's not like Brian just like sat there and just wrote off every like metalcore lyrical
Right, like
cliche.
trying to be hardo.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
No, he was on the ball with it. It felt like this was just like a piece of his brain just spewed out into lyrics, and it was just beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Also another thing too, I don't feel like they're like tacking on variations for the sake of doing that. You know what I mean? I feel like everything they're like using here has like a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I didn't notice too, as I went into this, was how there is like Spanish influence put into here. Because I'm like, okay, so we heard like the reggaeton style breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm noticing like the hand percussions and the bass and the drum soloing. I'm like, whoa, this sounds very, very like Spanish cultured, very Hispanic music cultured, like breakdowns here, like influences.
It was really cool to see how they weren't afraid to try new avenues of styles, particularly with the percussions, like you mentioned with you got like the stick clicks, a lot of that, and then there's special effects, different, like, I'm not sure exactly what particular drum you would call it, but just varying effects was really cool to hear.
Right. Also another thing too, like thinking to myself, wow, there's moments on here that remind me of like movies in a way. You got your staccato riffs on here, you got like your Twilight Zone arpeggios on here that land on a track that I didn't think I was going to enjoy, mostly because it like plays off as an interlude. I normally take points off for interludes. So, but this one here has like a purpose. And that's another thing too with the flow of this album. If you were to just like put the headphones on and just like listen to the album, not look at the track list like at all, I would believe you that it was one song. You know?
Yeah, it flows very naturally.
Yeah. Were there like any moments on this album where you looked at the track list and said, oh no, this is gonna fuck things up?
Funny, just after talking about the interlude, I know they have kind of played around in that environment per se.
Yeah.
They have like a very pad like structure to the song, very ambient and less harsh guitars.
Yeah.
And they've definitely explored that realm a little bit, but this time around it felt more authentic.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
Just going specifically off the interlude, it was it didn't feel like a filler track.
It didn't.
It seemed like in the beginning, like when you first get into it, you're like, okay, this is just to fulfill the track.
Yeah.
The amount of songs there are, amount of time, whatever, blah blah. But once you get into it, it's a good jam.
Yeah, definitely. And it's crazy too because like even though like the track is so short, it still has like a lot of variation to it, and has like a very like intense ending. Like I felt like I was like watching a horror movie, like Hereditary or something like that. Like on the outro,
very cinematic.
Yeah, very cinematic.
Yeah,
it's crazy because like I was thinking to myself, like I know I was like talking about like featured guests, and I was looking and I saw Poppy there. I was like, I loved their metal album that they put out, but I haven't really been a fan of anything they've came out with like after that. Like not crazy about it, but they killed it on this one. Like,
oh my god,
yeah,
unbelievably so. Particularly with Suffocate, that one crying scream, just one of my favorite metal moments.
Yeah,
maybe of all time.
Yeah,
it's just it hits so hard, and it's just man.
Yeah, and like you wouldn't, because there's like so many features on here you wouldn't think work, but work. Like Motionless in White with the feature on that, Slaughterhouse 2, that is actually you told me a sequel to Slaughterhouse 1, which is immensely better than this one. That was a joke. But yeah, I'm so glad they kept it heavy.
Yeah,
and we didn't get like Chris Motionless trying to do like his best Benjamin Burley impression.
Well, it's fun because with Slaughterhouse 1 being a track by Motionless in White featuring Brian Garris of Knocked Loose, they do a lot of callbacks and homages in Slaughterhouse 2 featuring Chris from Motionless in White.
Right.
And they're both very different songs.
Yeah.
Both trying to be heavy. Motionless in White stayed stuck to their, to their roots for the most part.
Yeah.
And then Knocked Loose, just their track blows Slaughterhouse 1 out of the water.
Right.
In terms of the heaviness scale. And
but
it's cool that they're able to have that kind of like a bond in the music environment, industry, I guess would be a better word.
Like one thing I'll say too, like they're not pandering, and they do, I think, do fan service for metalcore fans, because they have, and you correct me if I'm wrong, like the longest track, which is the outro, Sit and Mourn, but they have like this very ambient gothy style that all the goth gals and non-binary pals and guys, I fucked that up, are gonna dig, because I dug it. I'm like, ooh, they're getting gothy on this one, how dark and ambient,
very gloomy, very eerie.
Yeah, and honestly, that kind of brought me back to like old metalcore, because they used to have stuff like that, like back in the day. So I feel like there's definitely a lot of rehashing, but it's done in such like a heavy way. Like the only track on here I didn't really care for was the intro, and that was just because of how short it was.
Yeah, it's very straight to the point.
Yeah.
I think they knew what their hardcore fans, not hardcore in the sense of the music, but their tried and true fans, what they would want from a Knocked Loose album. Yeah. And it just hits you right in the face, and it's just a train wreck, Yeah. But yeah, very short, very not too experimental or anything, in that regard, but very straight to the point.
Yeah. Also another thing too, like I remember we mentioned before that there are like occurring themes in this album, and one of them was just like circle pit music. Like there's like 2 circle pit songs in my opinion. Whether it's Moss Covers All, Blinding Faith, which was a single going into this.
Great single to hype up the album.
Yeah.
And to go off of what you're saying about the mosh pit-esque style that they have pursued in a couple of the songs, I found it, and not just Knocked Loose, but I always find it interesting when I feel like a band is so experienced with live shows that they can then write songs for those moments. Yeah. And it's not just sitting in like a basement with your buddies, just let's write a song. Like it's like they're writing it for the crowd interaction and the experience. Right. Songs like those, where they know it's just people are just gonna go AWOL and go buck wild.
Yeah. It's very punchy. It's very pounding. It's very crushing. Like, it's very much, like, very present. You know what I mean? Like, I just love how this thing is just, like, obviously it's produced, but it's produced in such, like, a raw way, and I hope that doesn't really come off as, like, an oxymoron, where, yes, it is touched, but it's touched to enhance the density and the colossal monster that this album is.
And I know Will Putney. He's a big name in the sound engineer world. He recorded their previous record.
Yeah.
And I've always been a big fan of his. But comparing what I heard on the last record to this album, drastic difference in a great way on the new album. I just feel like the mix was great. Everything is so present and nothing is drowned out. Vocals sound great. The snare in particular sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And another thing on that, it's interesting to see the I guess you would say the how things kind of circle back. It's like cyclical in terms of specifically with the snare, and this is just nerd drummery, if you will. But you know, as things evolve, you know, snare tones, whatever, tend to change, and it's funny how this is kind of going back to like, it's almost got like a grindcore vibe to it. The way the snare is so highly toned and like it rings out, and it's got so much reverb behind it. It just like booms, and it's so well received in the mix.
And speaking of like reverb too, like the reverb, the distortion, like it really reminds me to touch on the guitar harmonies that are on this album that are just so ominous. Like, it's very like anticipated villain just showed up and they're about to just create like massive chaos.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I just love that feeling. I love like that horror movie feeling that they brought into the album.
They capture it so well.
Yeah.
And with previous records, they definitely have kind of dipped their toes in the water in that regard. And definitely captured it so well on this record. For me, I would say Blinding Faith is probably top 2 for me. Yeah. Overall. There's a lot of competition on this record, but Blinding Faith, I think it just hits so hard. It's got those great the intro dissonant palm muted. Yes. Just like just so grimy and like
I was just about to say that too. Like it has such like a very roller coaster of visceral production going on and playing, that at the end it just feels very cathartic. Like it just feels so dizzying after it's all said and done.
Yeah, it's so fun. And there's like it's kind of an odd choice on the drummer's behalf. There's like a double snare flam hit, but it just fills this little, there's like a void of the song leading in. It's like a break, I guess you would say. Right. And it just fills it perfectly, and it's so simple, but it's effective. Yeah. And as a drummer, it just like, it was like, yes, that was such a great choice of so simple, effective. Love it. Yeah, and I was actually about to say as a bass head, but
but yeah, as someone who loves bass, I feel like the bass really does have like a lot of presence here, and I love that. Yeah. You know, that's probably why I'm not really a huge fan of Injustice for All, because there's barely any bass on that thing. Right. But I digress. But yeah, everything they do here, everything they use is just adds so much character and atmosphere to the album. You know what I mean? It's not like everything is just like, again, it's not tacked on, and it's just perfectly placed.
Another thing I love that I've noticed since, I would say, A Tear in the Fabric of Life. Yes. Knocked Loose has not pioneered, but has really turned the tides of writing more intricate song structures where they don't repeat a lot of stuff. Right. And they keep it really interesting, and it's not predictable. Yeah. You know, like they'll run a a really good riff like one time,
Mhm.
and then it'll come like a breakdown will come in or something, and it just keeps it interesting for the listener.
Yeah.
And I love that. It adds a little bit more of a technicality to it,
Mhm.
even though it is a very caveman riff
Yeah.
band.
Yeah.
You know, they don't go too crazy on technicality wise, but the constant ever changing structures of the songs keeps it moving.
Right. But yeah, man, overall, I thought this album was monstrous. I felt like it really, like, there wasn't really a dull moment here. Like, everything, they really paid attention to detail, they filled in detail. There wasn't a moment that bored me,
Right.
you know? And overall, due to how crushing this album is, due to how, like, an absolute madman with the vocals Brian is on here, like, his vocals are so, like, piercing.
Yes.
And so, like, passionate. I think the writing is great. And even, like, with how destructive this album is and how chaotic this album is, it's also really catchy, too.
Yes.
Which is another thing I love about this album. And honestly, I would say, I think it ranks up, like, to Jane Doe. Like, Jane Doe to me is, like, the pinnacle of, like, metalcore. Which is a Converge album, by the way. Check that out. And, but protect your ears. But, yeah, like, how are you feeling on this, like, in terms of, like, a rating?
I'm so thrilled with it. I have been a fan of Knocked Loose for a very long time now. And sometimes I've been a little disappointed with some of their previous releases, but
Yeah.
you know, always kind of enjoyed it. But this album really just blows me away, and you know, it's crazy. They had those two singles, Deep in the Willow and Everything is Quiet Now.
Yeah.
I don't know if any fans really knew what was going on with those single releases. Like,
Yeah, because I didn't know.
yeah, I didn't know,
Yeah.
and I loved those. And to have a full album be a completely separate thing released after those, and still be as good or better,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Just so much talent to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, definitely.
You know?
Definitely. And yeah, like, with this being, like, the heaviest album I've heard all year, heaviest metalcore I've heard in decades, since Jane Doe, I'm feeling like a 4.5 Black Hearts on this album. Would you, like, agree with that rating, or would you say it's like a 5 out of 5 for you?
I would agree with that rating. Yeah, I'd say this is, when I think of heavy music, with as little bias as I can possibly have,
Yeah.
this is way up there on the scale.
Yeah.
When I think of heavy music, this is what I will think of this album.
Yeah. Like, I would even say this contends with, I mean, Botch is pretty heavy, if you've heard them before. Earth Crisis, back in the day, they were heavy, in terms of, like, metalcore context.
Right.
But,
And it's tough because, you know, they're tuned to drop G or whatever they're in.
right.
Depending on who you ask, you know,
Yeah.
anyone who thinks down-tuned guitar is like the lower you go, the heavier it gets. But I don't know. It's just it's all together. It's just so well done.
It is.
It's just great.
Yeah. But, yeah, man, thanks for having this conversation with me.
Absolutely,
Is great.
this was a blast.
Yeah, definitely. But if you've given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? And why? And that's it. Caspa, Gothic Ghost,
Bizzler. See you guys later.
till we meet again.